What's up, fake footballers? How's it going? This is Greg Smith. I'm here with the Week 2 starts and sits. I've got some new guys to recommend and discourage you from playing this week. Before we get to those, let's look back at last week, see how we did. And by we, I mean I. These are my choices, not yours, of course. And we'll start with quarterbacks. It's not pretty. Things could have gone better for us in Week 1 with QBs. We did hit on Carson Palmer and Andy Dalton, but my recommendations of Bradford, Eli, and Bridgewater did not work out. I still feel good about the Bradford and Eli calls. I should have been a little more patient before I recommended Bridgewater. Most people probably had a better option in Week 1. I think I only recommended him for 2 quarterback leagues, but even there you can see he finished at QB 28 with less than 10 points. And, you know, that's not what you want from your quarterback, even in a 2 QB league. In terms of sits, I feel really good about discouraging people from taking Russell Wilson. He finishes quarterback 15. I think that he'll do better this week, and we'll get to that later. Jay Cutler was also a sit. He finished at QB 19. And, you know, for 2 QB leagues, that's usable. That's good. I mean, you're inside the top 20 at that point. He should have a tougher matchup this time around with Arizona. Next up are Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. I pitted these guys against each other and said that they were both sits last week. I acknowledge that it was mostly due to uncertainty in terms of both of their offenses. And, you know, now we have a much better picture of how both of them are going to look. Winston definitely did worse than Mariota. I mean, Mariota was the 3rd best quarterback in Week 1, but Winston finished the week as QB 14, and that's not too bad, largely due to garbage time. But with that said, their schedule is pretty soft still, and even when they do lose, if he has to chuck it, that could equate to fantasy points. I'd be wary of him in leagues where interceptions are penalized with, you know, -2 or -3 points. But going forward, I still think he'll be okay as a streaming option. But again, I'm not using him this week against New Orleans, and, you know, we got to be wary of him going forward because he does look like kind of a mess at this point. Maybe he'll get better. Last up was another whiff, Alex Smith, QB 5 in Week 1. I thought that he would do worse against that Houston defense. We saw this week on Thursday night how he did against another strong defense, and that was not quite as good against Denver. So, again, you hit and miss with some of these streaming candidates. We're not going to get them all right, and we definitely missed on some of these. Next up are running backs. Chris Ivory, Amir Abdullah, Benny Cunningham, all good calls. Doug Martin, not so much. Finishes the 40th running back in terms of points. And Crowell, I acknowledged when I recommended him that it might have been foolish to do so, being in the same game as Chris Ivory, who I thought was going to do well. So, you know, chalk that up as a lesson learned. I'll be wary of making that sort of recommendation again. On the sit side, Alfred Morris definitely outperformed my expectations, finishing with 12.1 points, RB 17 for Week 1. He's going to get volume. They're not going to want Kirk Cousins to win every game for them, so Morris will probably be okay in general. He'll at least have a safe-ish floor. I'm really scared to use him this week against the Rams, who looked awesome on defense. But for the most part, Morris, maybe his demise was a little exaggerated in the preseason. Melvin Gordon, Joseph Randall, Alfred Blue. I feel good about all those calls. I mean, Randall did okay, but that matchup was pretty good, and he only scored about 11 points. He finished his RB 23, which is, you know, a starter essentially in a 12-team league. But that backfield situation worries me, especially now that Dez Bryant is out, and we might see teams stack the box a little heavier against the Cowboys. Bishop Sankey also, like Morris, greatly outperformed what I expected. He finished it as the 4th best running back in Week 1, scoring over 20 points. I think that was mostly due to game script and just the fact that the Titans were completely blowing out the Buccaneers in that matchup. So I feel good about the call in general to avoid him because I don't think every game he's going to have the benefit of, you know, having such a huge lead against a bad defense like that. Wide receiver, we hit pretty well on the Cardinals receivers. Fitzgerald and John Brown both had nice games. Vincent Jackson was a miss. We've already talked about what happened with Jameis and that Buccaneers offense. They really just had a rough day. The only person who really performed there was Austin Seferian-Jenkins. Stevie Johnson, that was a nice call. Wide receiver 9 on the week with 14-plus points. Terrence Williams finished as wide receiver 38. Disappointing, especially considering that Dez did get hurt in that game and didn't play, in the second half there. But in general, I think that the process was good there. Someone is going to have to step up now that Dez is out, and Williams should produce more than 6 points this week. Kamar Aiken, of course, was a deep league consideration, and he didn't score any points, so that was brutal. But we'll see what happens now that the Ravens are facing a much worse defense in the Raiders this week than the Broncos last week. For sits, I missed on Brandon Marshall. I really thought that Joe Hayden was going to eat him up, and Marshall, he got it done. He scored that touchdown, finished with 12 points as wide receiver 12 on the week. In general, just kind of a bad week for wide receivers. As you can see, if the 12th best wide receiver only scored 12 points, that's not so bad of a call. I mean, the best wide receivers, the top 12 guys, you want to see 15 to 25 points, and Marshall didn't quite get there, but he did better than most other guys, so that was a bad recommendation. Torrey Smith, Marquez Colson, Devin Funchess, Devontae Parker, none of these guys did well. Those were all pretty good calls. Tight end, nailed it on Eifert. Not super unpredictable there. I think a lot of people had Eifert performing well in that matchup. I think we have to consider him, just an every week starter at this point, based upon his role in that offense and his physical abilities. Otherwise, at tight end, we didn't do so great. But with that said, most of these guys were kind of deeper considerations, flyers. Larry Donnell or Donnell, Richard Rodgers, Charles Clay, Crockett Gilmore, Ben Watson. Clay was the best of those calls, scoring 4.3 points. He could be a little bit of a sleeper this week against New England, if only because Buffalo may be playing from behind. On the sit side, Zach Ertz finishes tight end 22 with 4.6 points. He got a lot more snaps and more targets than I was anticipating, but I do think his usage is going to vary going forward, and we'll get to that later. Last up, Owen Daniels and Kobe Fleener. Both of these guys were pretty bad, and I don't think there's any reason to trust either of them going forward. I mean, Daniels does seem to have the trust of Peyton Manning, but I just think there are better options at tight end than either of these guys. All right, so with week one's results out of the way, we're going to jump into week two, looking ahead. What can we expect this week? To do that, we're going to jump back to something I came up with last year. I called it Game Flowbotics. We're generally trying to predict the game script or the game flow for any given matchup. And to do that, we're using Football Outsiders DVOA rankings. These are general, overall rankings of certain units. They have, overall team rankings, offensive rankings, defensive rankings, passing offense, rushing offense, and then vice versa for defense. Eventually, we're going to have DVOA values on offensive and defensive lines. Those will be coming from Football Outsiders later on. These are good measures of how certain units are expected to perform, and I believe that based on these numbers, we can glean a little bit more information about how a game should play out. We're also going to use information about, the Vegas numbers, the spread, the over-under, and see if that can help us predict which games and which players are going to produce for fantasy. So let's start off with this Houston and Carolina matchup. In Carolina, they're favored by 3, a low over-under, so this is expected to be a low-scoring game. Early action was on the Panthers, and you can see that by this minus 120 here. That means that more people, when this line opened, were betting on the Panthers to beat that spread of 3 points. So what does that mean? Well, in general, I would expect that the Panthers are going to win this game, but because of the low over-under, we're probably not going to see a whole lot of scoring. Last week, I was low on Alex Smith. I believe that was a good process. I think the Houston defense is very good and will be very good. It just seems like the Chiefs had most of the answers they needed for that particular matchup. In this game, however, I'm staying away from Cam Newton for the same reasons I didn't like Alex Smith last week. He's a sit for me. And like last week, I'm recommending you stay away from Alfred Blue. I generally don't believe you want any part of the the Houston running game until Arian Foster gets back. Next up is San Francisco and Pittsburgh. San Francisco surprised me. It surprised a lot of people on Monday night. Carlos Hyde looked like the real deal. Showed off some of the talent that had us, picking him highly as a stash or a keeper last year. And then for whatever reason over the summer, myself included, we fell off the bandwagon. I think that there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding San Francisco. this is what happens after week one occurs. We see what goes on in these games, and we have to start changing our perceptions of what these teams are going to be. With that said, going into Pittsburgh should be a much tougher test than facing the Vikings at home. Pittsburgh is favored by almost 6 points. The over-under is reasonable here at 45. I don't know exactly how this game's going to play out. I do expect Pittsburgh to win. I'll trust Vegas and the spread on this. I think they bounce back. And I do think that while their primary producers, Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Heath Miller, they should be fine. I'm a little worried about D'Angelo Williams. The Niners bottled up Adrian Peterson on Monday night fairly well. It'll be interesting on a short week to see if they can come up with that sort of effort again against a better offense. But with that said, this large spread and relatively high over-under would lead me to believe that the Niners will be playing from behind to some extent, and so that makes their passing game somewhat appealing to me. So I'm just going to say that you should be starting Kaepernick, Bolden, and Vernon Davis. I'm higher on Kaepernick than most this week. VD and Bolden are safer plays than Kaepernick in particular because they can't throw interceptions. We'll see how that plays out. I do expect Pittsburgh to win, but keep an eye on those passing options for San Francisco. We'll look at Tampa Bay and New Orleans next. New Orleans is a heavy favorite at home here. Their defense is an easy streaming candidate. They are not a good defensive unit, but going against Jameis Winston in the Dome, they are a nice value for streaming defense folks. I expect New Orleans to handle this game pretty easily. With that said, I am wary of their passing options just because I don't know how Breeze is going to spread it around from week to week. This is a perennial problem with the Saints and other teams like New England. They have a lot of options in those passing games. I have a feeling this is going to be more of a CJ Spiller and Mark Ingram week, assuming Spiller takes the field. If he does play, I think he's a start. I do like Austin Seferian-Jenkins at tight end for the Buccaneers, anticipating that they're going to be playing from behind. Mike Evans, if he plays, will be, probably in my top 20 among wide receivers. And I liked Vincent Jackson last week. I think he could be fine this week too. He should have an easier time, hopefully, but you never know. I mean, he didn't do much against Tennessee. I understand that, New Orleans may not even be as good of a defense as Tennessee, but just the struggles of Jameis Winston have me wary of, deploying Vincent Jackson this week. Anyway, getting back to my concerns about New Orleans passing game, I'm going to avoid Brandon Coleman and Marquez Colston in this game. There have already been rumors and rumblings that Will Snead is going to be playing more for New Orleans, and if he's taken away snaps from Coleman and Colston, it'll just be really hard to predict who is going to get the targets there, particularly in the red zone. I have a feeling I'm either going to be too low on Coleman or too low on Colston in my rankings. I have them both around the same area. And the reason for that is just I don't know which one of them is going to be good, and I don't feel like, flipping the coin to guess. Let's move on to Detroit and Minnesota. I hit on Amir Abdullah last week. I'm running him out again as a start. He just seems so talented. They're going to have to get him the ball more if they want to win games. And we saw what, Carlos Hyde did to the Minnesota defense. Abdullah can do the same thing. And even Joique Bell, to some extent, seems like a reasonable start here, especially if he can get some goal line work and maybe punch one in for a touchdown. I'm not, recommending him as a surefire start, whereas Abdullah is for me. I think he's a must start in this game. I have him inside of my top 20 running backs. I am going to sit Charles Johnson, the wide receiver for the Vikings, and that's mainly because he did not look like he had chemistry with Teddy Bridgewater on Monday night. That scares me. I do have a lot of shares of Charles Johnson. I'm hoping that they turn it around and start to develop some chemistry, but until they show me that they have it, I'm going to be avoiding Johnson in my lineups. Next up's one of the more interesting matchups for me this week. Arizona going to Chicago as a road favorite. Spread at 2.5 points. Over-unders 45. Chris Johnson is a nice plug-in option if you need a running back and you got him off the waiver wire. But aside from him, David Johnson's an intriguing guy to me too. Now that Ellington is hurt, David Johnson should see most of the work in the passing game, and I do expect Chicago to keep this game somewhat respectable, being the home team and having lost in week 1. I like Martellus Bennett. He's a start for me this week. But yeah, with that said, I think that David Johnson could see more work than some might predict. He's a start for me as well. On the sit side, I am probably going to sit Jay Cutler in standard or 12 to 14 team leagues. In deeper leagues, 2 quarterback leagues, you might want to start him. He could be okay, but that Arizona defense is pretty good, and you might just have some better options with better matchups this week. On to New England and Buffalo. The Buffalo Bills surprised everyone. They shocked the Colts and us by winning in week 1. I don't expect them to take the Patriots quite as off guard this week. I expect the Patriots to win this game. They're only favored by 1 point, and that's a nod to the very stingy Buffalo defense and the fact that they're playing on the road. But I think we're going to see another one of those FU seasons from Belichick and the Patriots. They're going to want to come into this game and blow Buffalo out. I'm sure Buffalo's going to want to show up and do well too. But with that said, I'm avoiding Tyrod Taylor. I think the Patriots will be a little bit more well-equipped to deal with him and what he offers as an offensive weapon than the Colts were. I'm also sitting LeGarrette Blount. We just talked about him. He's a guy that, while I have him everywhere, he's a very valid touchdown upside guy every week. On the goal line, he's very hard to stop. But with that said, this Bills defense is very good. I can envision a situation where Dion Lewis gets more touches, and in general, the Patriots just look to pass the ball and avoid that Buffalo defensive line at all costs. The last sit for me here is Sammy Watkins. I don't know if the Patriots are going to try to take him away like Indianapolis did last week, but the Colts showed that it can be done, and that worries me, especially with Tyrod at QB. I don't like Tyrod, and therefore I don't like Sammy Watkins this week either. Let's go next to the Chargers and the Bengals. Bengals coming off an impressive win against the lowly Raiders, so this 1-0 record that they have is not quite impressive, but at the same time they did look really good in that game. Early action came in on them in Vegas. The spread was set at 3 points. Cincinnati the favorite, and people were pounding that Cincinnati bet. They got it up to -120. I do feel like this is a tough matchup for San Diego. I agree with the betting public here. Low over-under means that this isn't going to be a high-scoring game. And the only person I'm really excited to start in this matchup is Tyler Eifert. Again, I do think that he's just a top 6, top 7 tight end option for the rest of the year. So I won't mention him every week going forward, but for one more week, I'm going to highlight him and how I am, convinced that he should be in your starting lineups. On the flip side, guys that I'm sitting in this are basically the Chargers passing attack. Phillip Rivers, Stevie Johnson, Ladarius Green. I think that they're all, fine to start if you have them. But with that said, I might be looking for options with better matchups this week. Chances are, if you drafted Rivers, Stevie, or Ladarius, most of those guys were initially bench plays for you, not intended to be starters. I have a feeling that your starters this week will offer a little bit more upside with some safer matchups. Again, it all depends on context and who else is on your roster. But for me personally, I'm lower on Phil, Stevie, and Ladarius than I would be in a normal week. Let's get to what might be the worst matchup of the week. Tennessee going to Cleveland. There's some intrigue here. I can't lie about that. I mean, Mariota, let's see if he can do it again. Johnny Manziel, he's starting this game. What can he do? The Tennessee defense looked really good against Jameis Winston. I have a feeling it'll look, probably pretty good against Manziel as well. So I think that the Tennessee defense is a nice streaming option here. With that said, I wouldn't expect such a huge game from Kendall Wright in week 2. I don't see any reason for Joe Hayden not just to blanket him all over the field. Kendall Wright is not Brandon Marshall to me. I don't necessarily think that he's going to be able to beat that Joe Hayden coverage quite the same way that Marshall was. So he's a stay away from me this week. I do like him, going forward as a PPR play, though. Next, let's get to Atlanta and the Giants. This is the second highest over-under of the week. That means a lot of points. The Giants are favored by 2, and the betting public came in and backed that bet. Not a huge amount. I mean, the spread only got up to -115 versus the standard -110. And I have a feeling it was probably due to the fact that it's a 2-point spread instead of a traditional 3-point spread. With that said, I love Eli again. He burned me in week 1, but I'm going back to the well with Eli. I'll be starting him. I think he's a great DFS play this week. In general, I think that all of the passing offense options here, and even some of the runners, will be usable. It's hard to say which running backs are going to have the easier time. Game script affects those guys so much. But with that said, I'm backing Rashad Jennings. He's the start for me this week, and I'm not really avoiding anybody on Atlanta, but I do think that most of them are kind of about where they would be normally in the rankings. Tevin Coleman, Julio Jones is just an every week start anyway. Matt Ryan, definitely a top 10 play. This matchup is going to be good. If you have these players, you're probably going to want to start them. Let's move on to what might be the most lopsided game of the weekend. The Rams going into Washington. The Rams defense was very impressive against Seattle, and if they were good against Seattle, imagine how good they can be against Kirk Cousins and the lowly Washington team. I expect this to be somewhat of a blowout. St. Louis, despite being the road team, should win this game convincingly. With that said, you might expect the running backs, Trey Mason and Benny Cunningham, to be solid plays. I'm a little too worried about what the usage split is going to be and just how healthy Trey Mason is to deploy either one. I think in deeper leagues you can consider either, but I'll be avoiding them, and they're both sits for me this week. The other guy I'm sitting here, again, is Alfred Morris. He beat me last week. I said to sit him. He did all right, but this week against the Rams, I can't, within good conscience, recommend starting him. You might not have better options. I get that. And if that's the case, you're going to run them out. But if you can do better, check out the rankings at the Fake Football or wherever you get your rankings. See where Morris lies relative to the other runners available to you. You may have a safer play, one without such a tough matchup. My one start from this game is Jared Cook, the tight end for the Rams. He might just be the best red zone target that Nick Foles has, and I just feel that he represents a very good upside, especially in this game where St. Louis shouldn't have too much trouble moving the ball against Washington. Let's move on next to Miami and Jacksonville. Lamar Miller, kind of disappointing in week one. I expect a big bounce back here. He's definitely a start for me. I think most people drafted him to be a starter, but I want to, definitely highlight the fact that Lamar Miller is a top 10 play for me this week against the Jags. Miami defense also, a very good option. I have a feeling they're going to be owned everywhere, but they should be good. Allen Robinson, I wanted to recommend him as a start last week. I'm glad I didn't. With that said, I have a feeling he's going to bounce back to some extent. In this matchup, I'm not going to recommend him either, but don't pour dirt on his grave just yet. Let's see how he plays in the next couple weeks. He might get up to, close to the level where we were expecting he would be in the preseason. Move next to the Ravens and the Raiders. This one's in Oakland. Baltimore is a heavy favorite, almost an entire touchdown, 6.5 points, 43 over under, and I expect most of those points to be scored by Baltimore in this game. The Oakland secondary really got decimated. Charles Woodson is out. I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for Joe Flacco to get on track with his receivers. So Joe Flacco and Steve Smith are both starts for me this week. One guy in this game I'm avoiding is Latavius Murray. I believe he's a sit. That Baltimore defense is really good. They're going to be able to stack the box against the Raiders and force, David Carr or, God forbid, Matt McGloin to beat them. So stay away from Murray if you can help it. Our next matchup has the biggest over-under of the week, Dallas and Philadelphia. This is going to be a shootout, or at least that's what Vegas thinks. Philly is favored by 5 points. That's a pretty big deal. I have a feeling that's a little inflated due to the Dez injury. It'll be interesting to see how that Dallas receiving core, responds to the loss of Dez. I think Romo will in general be fine. He's not the, elite quarterback that I expected him to be at this point for fantasy in the preseason, but he should still be pretty good. The Philly defense is decent against the run. I do think they have holes. We saw that in the passing game with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones last week. Is Terrence Williams the guy who can exploit that? I'm going to say yes for this week. He's a start for me. I also like Cole Beasley in deeper formats, where you have to, dig a little deeper to find those starting wide receivers. Jason Witten's definitely a start, but I don't need to tell you that. On the Philadelphia side of the ball, I am starting Bradford. I'm starting Nelson Aguilar. He had a disappointing week one, but stay the course. I think he'll be fine, and this is a really nice matchup for him. Sits for me, Zach Ertz. He surprised us. He had more targets than we thought, but I just have a feeling the Philadelphia offensive production and how they spread around their targets is going to be so volatile from week to week that if you deploy Ertz, you're just running too big of a risk of getting a bad week. Sunday night game is Seattle at Green Bay. Seattle's favored by 3.5 points. A pretty high over-under here at 49 points. We saw what Matt Forte did to the Packers on Sunday. And you know what? Marshawn Lynch is just as capable of doing that. He's my number one running back this week. And, I mean, he's a no-brainer start if you drafted him. So he won't be listed on the text version of these starts and sits. But feel good about Marshawn Lynch. In fact, I feel good about Seattle in this game in general. I have a feeling they're going to win. I do like Russell Wilson. He's my QB4 this week. And by that same token, I like his receivers as deeper plays. If you need to go there, Jermaine Kearse, Doug Baldwin, even Tyler Lockett, all those guys should be pretty good this week. Maybe not all of them, but at least one or two of them should produce. And that's all I really got here. Nothing to see. I have a feeling just both the offenses are going to play well in this game, and you're going to want whatever pieces you have to be active. Last up is our Monday night game, the Jets going into Indy. It'll be interesting to see how the Colts handle the Jets receivers. They really made an effort to take out Sammy Watkins in week 1. Will they do the same for Brandon Marshall this week? Eric Decker, will they spread it around? I'm not sure, but Decker is a start for me because I feel like if they are going to focus on one receiver, it'll be Marshall, and that'll open things up for Decker. He scored in week 1. I think that he could score again here. I like him a lot. By that same token, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's going to have to chuck it to keep up with this Colts offense. I think the Colts have a little bit to prove here. They need to show that, their offense isn't completely helpless. And, Andrew Luck's a very good quarterback. He's going to pass. And Fitzpatrick's going to have to keep up with that. On the other side with Luck, I'm saying to start Dante Moncrief. I'm a believer. I think that Andre Johnson looks washed up. And, Moncrief is kind of the heir apparent. My one concern is that Revis might, latch on to Moncrief. But I have a feeling the Jets will focus his attention not only on Moncrief, but he'll probably get some time on AJ. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. At tight end, Fleener is a sit for me. I mentioned him last week. I won't keep harping on these same guys week in, week out, but the Colts just have so many receiving options, and Fleener is definitely not one of the better ones, so he's a guy I'm avoiding altogether. So that does it for the week 2 starts and sits here at the Fake Football. If you have any questions in general about who to start, who to sit, your best resource is our rankings page. The week 2 rankings, you can find a link to it on the blog post for this video. All three of us, myself, Jeff Brubach, Rich Rebar, do our rankings, every position, top to bottom. We're going to disagree in some spots, and this is kind of where you can see where my starts and sits are coming from. I'm the highest on Eli Manning at 7th, for example. He's a start for me this week. You'll see the same thing at other positions. So check these out if you get a chance, and good luck in your week 2 matchups.